My name is Lily Harper. I'm 38. And as my brother Jake smiled at Mom's casket at Evergreen Funeral Home in Bellevue, Washington, he whispered to our 47 relatives, finally secured the family legacy. Mom's will leaves the entire $2, $8 million real estate portfolio to me. You know that rehearsed smirk lips, curled, eyes flat, hand on the mahogany casket with white lilies, Chanel No. 5 scent hitting like her last chemo days. Hands cold on my skirt, heart thudding like a notary stamp. No gasp, no accusation. I opened my Hopper & Associates laptop, logged into the portal. There, 2-year-old notarized contingency file, metadata pristine under RCW 11. 12. Odd 20 cosigns on those Seattle duplexes locked. Jake smirked. Pass door droned. I clicked shut. Family legacy. I'd covered at $1,200 monthly mortgages before I tell you what they said and what happened after I walked out. Tell me what time it is, where you are, and where you're watching from. I'm curious to see how far this story will travel. Growing up in our split-level house in Bellevue, Washington, we looked like the kind of family people envied from the curb. Fresh mulch, clean windows, a mother who waved at neighbors and brought casseroles to church potlucks. From the outside, we looked stable. Inside, we ran on a different system. Jake got warmth. I got weight. I was 12 when my father left. He took 2 suitcases, half the tools from the garage, and whatever softness still lived in that house. After that, Mom rebuilt the family around Jake. He was 8, charming, loud, and always forgiven before he even finished apologizing. She called him her little man of the house. She called me dependable. That sounds kind until you realize dependable usually means the child you can quietly turn into unpaid labor. You know that family role. The one that does not come with praise so much as expectation. Jake forgot homework and Mom said he was distracted. I got a 94 and she asked where the other 6 points went. On Sundays we sat under the brass dining room light, eating pot roast at the oak table, and every week the same thing happened. Jake talked about baseball practice, and Mom laughed like he was already somebody important. I cleared plates, made the grocery list, checked the fridge for what was missing, and mentally calculated whether the checking account could handle another surprise expense. By 15, I was balancing Mom's checkbook by hand because her nursing shifts at Overlake Hospital left her too tired to look at receipts. Jake, meanwhile, was learning that a smile and the word family could open almost any locked door. That pattern did not fade when we got older. It got more expensive. I went to the University of Washington and double majored in accounting and pre-law because numbers made more sense to me than feelings did. Numbers leave trails. Contracts punish assumptions. During the day, I sat in class with tab casebooks and color-coded notes. At night, I worked a diner shift near campus and came home smelling like coffee grounds and fryer oil. Jake enrolled in community college, dropped out after 1 semester, bounced between sales jobs, and somehow still got treated like he was in a temporary rough patch instead of a permanent one. Mom helped with his gas, then rent, then a used Mustang because he needed to look polished for clients. I took the bus and told myself it was fine. It is amazing what you can call fine when you are used to being the floor other people stand on. I became an estate planning attorney because I understood early that families rarely collapse in one dramatic moment. They collapse in documents, in unsigned amendments, in deed transfers nobody reads carefully, in promises everyone remembers differently after a funeral. I started at a Seattle firm reviewing revocable living trusts, pour-over wills, powers of attorney, homestead filings, and notarized affidavits with tiny defects that would turn into giant legal wars later. I was good at it because I did not romanticize blood. I had already seen what favoritism looks like when it gets old enough to wear a suit. By 28, I made partner at Harper & Associates. We handled estate plans for business owners, physicians, and families with multiple properties. I built systems with backup on top of backup, clean title chains, successor trustee provisions, asset schedules cross-referenced against deed records and account authority. In my world, the smallest missing digit can cost someone everything. I knew that professionally long before I learned how much it would matter personally. Mom's cancer diagnosis came when I was 32. Stage 3, pancreatic. I still remember the paper gown crackling when she shifted on the exam table and the dry chemical smell in the oncology wing. Jake cried in the parking garage and punched the steering wheel once, like that counted as support. I handled insurance, treatment calendars, specialist referrals, billing disputes, and everything else that keeps a sick person alive when the system starts treating them like a file number. That was when the hidden pipeline really started. Mom owned 4 rental properties by then, mostly duplexes in Seattle neighborhoods that had appreciated hard over the years. Fremont, Capitol Hill, North Seattle. On paper they were hers. In practice, I was the one keeping the whole machine upright. I co-signed loans when underwriting got tight. I organized rent collection through Propertyware. I exported monthly ledgers into QuickBooks. I tracked vacancies, maintenance calls, lease renewals, tax forms, and utility payments. The portfolio brought in around $14,000 a month gross, enough to look impressive to outsiders and chaotic to anyone who has ever actually managed property. The first mortgage payment I covered was supposed to be temporary, $1,200 while Mom was on medical leave. Then it became another month, then another, then hospice copays, overnight care, prescription costs, plumbing emergencies at one of the duplexes, and property tax timing problems. I set up autopay, filled gaps quietly, and kept moving. That was always my role. If something broke, I became the repair. Jake knew just enough to benefit from the system, never enough to carry it. He texted me the way people text the lender. They assume we'll never say no. Can you send $2,000 till Friday? Need help with insurance. New client deals about to close. 53 transfers over 5 years. 53. Mom defended every one of them with the same tired sentence. He is your brother, Lily. Family helps family. Funny how that sentence only ever pointed in my direction. And this is the part that was hardest to admit even to myself. I still love them. You can see the pattern clearly and still want the people in it to finally choose you right. I would leave chemo appointments angry at Mom, then stop to buy the lemon cookie she liked because she could still manage 2 bites on her better days. I would resent Jake at noon and answer his call at 1 because some old hopeful part of me still believed siblings could grow into honesty. Toward the end, Mom named me successor trustee. Officially. Signed, notarized, witnessed, filed, and digitally backed up. I updated amendments, maintained the records, and tightened everything because in my line of work I had learned one brutal truth. Death does not create greed. It exposes it. Jake started asking for account access near the end, rental dashboards, copies of deeds, bank visibility. He framed it as helping Mom understand her own holdings. I gave him limited access because saying no in front of a dying woman who still wanted to believe her children would stay united felt cruel. Looking back, that was my mistake. I confused proximity with maturity. I thought letting him see the structure might make him respect it. What I did not understand then was that I had spent my whole life holding up a family system that only looked stable because I kept tightening the bolts in silence. Jake thought the house stood on love. I knew it stood on signatures, payment histories, passwords, and the one daughter who never stopped checking the numbers. That was the world before the funeral. Before the smile. Before my brother looked at a casket and thought the quiet one in the room had brought nothing to the table. The funeral reception was held in the side parlor at Evergreen, the kind of room designed to make grief look organized. Beige walls, fold-out tables, stainless steel coffee urns, a tray of finger sandwiches curling at the edges because no one ever eats enough at those things. People stood in soft little circles, speaking in that hushed church voice families use when they want to look respectful while gathering information. Jake stood in the center of the room like it was a campaign event. His tie was loosened just enough to suggest sorrow. His hand still held the same folded tissue he had dabbed under his eyes during the service, though I noticed it was still perfectly dry. Cousins circled him. Aunt Karen leaned in. Uncle Mike had one hand on Jake's shoulder like he was congratulating a man after a business deal, not comforting the son who had just buried his mother. I stayed near the back wall with a paper cup of coffee going cold in my hand and watched the room settle into the shape it had always taken. Jake in the center, me at the edge. Everyone acting like that arrangement came from God. Then he raised his voice just enough. I guess Mom knew who could really carry this family. A few heads turned, then all of them did. Jake pulled his phone from his jacket pocket and opened the PDF. He held it out with that smug half-smile he had worn since childhood, the one that said he had already tested the room and knew it would forgive him. Updated will, he said. Signed 3 months ago. She left me the whole portfolio, all 4 properties. Says she wanted one person handling the legacy, not someone who'd nickel and dime family over paperwork. There it was, not just the theft, the performance. Aunt Karen gave a soft gasp. Well, that makes sense. Uncle Mike nodded like a man reviewing a smart investment. Your mother always knew you had vision, Jake. Vision. That word almost made me laugh. Jake had defaulted on 2 car loans before 30, and once asked me if escrow was a kind of tax. But family mythology is stronger than fact when people are already committed to the story. And they were. They had been for years. Jake turned toward me then, knowing exactly where I was standing. Lily, don't make that face, he said loud enough for everyone. You were helping with admin stuff, that's all. Mom wanted the assets with someone who understands people, not spreadsheets. A few people laughed. Small, embarrassed, approving laughs, the kind that let cruelty pass through a room dressed as humor. My fingers tightened around the coffee cup. The cardboard seam bent under my thumb. My hands were cold, but I could feel heat rising in my neck. You know that feeling when your body wants to react before your mind gives permission? Mine did, but I did not give it permission. I took one sip of stale coffee, set the cup down, and looked at him the way I look at witnesses who think confidence can substitute for consistency. Congratulations, I said. That irritated him for a second. Not enough to stop, just enough to sharpen him. He stepped closer. No hard feelings, right? I mean, you were never really the family type anyway. Mom knew that. You treat everything like a billing entry. There are insults people throw in anger, and then there are the ones they have been saving. That one had been polished, stored, brought out for the right room. My chest tightened so suddenly it felt mechanical. Behind him, on the memorial table, sat a framed photograph of Mom, in a blue sweater she wore every Thanksgiving. For one stupid second, all I could think about was the last time I adjusted her blanket in hospice, and how light her wrist had felt in my hand. That was the only crack in me. Not his words. Her face. Then Jake finished what he came to do. Before I even reached the parking lot, my phone buzzed. A Facebook story. He had posted a photo from the funeral home with the caption, "Honoring Mom by protecting the Harper legacy." Some people manage paperwork. Some people build futures. He tagged me in it. That was the point of no return. Not because it was cruel, though it was. Not because it was public, though that mattered. It was because he was smiling while holding a forged will and truly believed there would be no consequence. No shame, no hesitation, just that old family immunity he had been living on his whole life. Back in my condo that night, I opened Mom's original estate file from the secure archive. The real will was exactly where I had placed it, executed cleanly, witnessed correctly, assets split evenly. My eyes moved once across the forged version Jake had flashed at the reception. Page 7, signature line wrong, initial placement off. Timestamp inconsistent with hospice visitation records. Notary blocked from a county. Mom had not stepped into in 11 months. He had not just lied. He had forged a dead woman's final instructions and smiled over her coffin while doing it. I did not cry. I did not call him. I opened a new folder on my desktop and named it exactly what it was. Evidence. I did not sleep that night. Not because I was unraveling. Unraveling is noisy. This was precise. I sat barefoot at my kitchen island with the lights off, except for the laptop glow, and started building a case file. Original will, prior amendments, trust schedules, deeds, mortgage statements, rent rolls, property tax records, hospice visitation logs, notary journals, email chains, portal access history. I duplicated everything and sent one encrypted copy to outside counsel before sunrise. In estate litigation, the first rule is simple. The moment someone thinks they need evidence, they also become capable of destroying it. By 5:40 a.m., I had both versions of Mom's will side by side on my screen. The fake one was sloppy in the way arrogant people are sloppy. Her signature line was wrong. Mom's real signature always lifted slightly at the end of Harper, especially after chemo when her wrist got tired. This one dipped. The initials on page 3 sat too close to the margin. The notary block showed a date when she was in hospice, medicated, with visitor logs that placed her in bed all afternoon. That was Jake's weakness. He thought emotion would carry the lie. He forgot paperwork has bones. At 7:15, I was in a conference room at Harper & Associates, but I was not using my own firm. Personal cases contaminate clean judgment. I hired outside probate counsel, Daniel Reese, and sent him the preliminary packet. He reviewed it, looked at me once, and asked, "What access does he have right now that still makes him feel powerful?" That question organized the whole morning. Jake did not understand the difference between inheriting property and controlling the system around it. Mom may have owned the rentals, but the actual operating structure ran through me. I had built it over years. Banking alerts came to my phone. Property where administrator rights were under my credentials. Emergency maintenance approvals ran through my account. Mortgage auto pay on Mom's primary home came from my American Express. Lease packets, bindle authorizations, reserve funds, and monthly QuickBooks exports all passed through systems I maintained, so I started removing myself. I revoked administrator access to the property portal. I restricted shared banking visibility pending fraud review. I canceled the auto pay I had been covering on Mom's mortgage. I froze the emergency repair reserve tied to my account. I terminated vendor authorizations issued under my name. I removed every estate file from the shared family folder and locked them behind counsel review. I scheduled a forensic document examiner. I prepared a criminal referral packet for forgery. No speech, no warning, no dramatic text. Just click. Confirm, save, revoke. At 5:56 a.m., Jake texted, "Hey, weird question. I can't log into the rental portal." I left it unread. 3 minutes later, another message. Did something glitch? Then the call started. 2, then 5, then 9. Voicemail after voicemail, each one losing a little polish. "Lily, call me back. I've got tenants reaching out." "Why would you lock me out?" That phrase stayed with me. "Lock me out." That phrase stayed with me. "Lock me out." As if he had ever been inside legitimately. By noon, Daniel had drafted the preservation notice and probate challenge. We were not filing publicly yet. First, we secured the perimeter. People like Jake do their most reckless work in the small window between suspicion and consequence. Daniel sent formal notice to preserve devices, records, login history, and communications related to Mom's estate. I requested certified hospice attendance records and notary confirmation logs. I exported texts where Jake referred to the properties as basically mine anyway. There were too many of them, casual and stupid in the way entitlement often is. At 2:20, I had the only quiet crack in my day. I found one of Mom's scars folded over the back of the guest room chair, pale blue, soft from years of wear. It still held a faint trace of Chanel No. 5 under the sterile smell of the last few weeks. I sat down with it in my hands and looked at nothing for a minute. Not crying. Not moving. Just feeling the full weight of how badly I'd wanted my brother not to become this person. Then my phone lit up again. "Lily, seriously. Tenants are calling me." And that was enough. By late afternoon, the unplugging was complete. The system no longer recognized Jake as someone with authority because legally he never had any. All I had done was remove the illusion. That matters. I did not sabotage him. I stopped subsidizing his performance of ownership. At 6:12 p.m., I sent a single email, subject line, "Formal notice of disputed testamentary instrument." attached with a preservation demand, notice of anticipated probate contest, and a warning that any attempt to transfer, encumber, or represent ownership of estate assets would be documented and referred for further action. No anger, no all caps, no family speech. Just records. That was the pivot. At the funeral, Jake thought my silence meant humiliation had landed clean. What he actually saw was the moment I stopped behaving like his sister and started behaving like the attorney who had spent 2 decades cleaning up messes, exactly like him. I did not hear from Jake at all on day 1. That alone told me more than any voicemail could have. People like him stay quiet only when they still think they can fix the optics before anyone notices the foundation moving. He probably thought a few calls, a few passwords, a few half-true explanations would put him back in position. Maybe he told himself I was emotional and would cool off. Maybe he believed the old family pattern would hold, that I would do what I had always done and quietly stabilize the structure after he shook it. Day 2, he posted again. Not about the funeral this time. About the properties. A photo of himself in front of the Fremont duplex, sunglasses on, one hand in his pocket, captioned, "Big responsibilities, big legacy, ready to build." It got 37 likes and 2 comments from people who had no idea he did not have legal control of a mailbox, let alone a portfolio. I looked at it once and then forwarded the screenshot to Daniel. Public misrepresentation is still misrepresentation, even when it is written like a motivational quote. Day 4 was when the first crack made noise. A tenant from the Capitol Hill duplex emailed the estate account because the plumbing backed up into the downstairs unit and no one had responded for 20 hours. Usually that alert came to me, got approved in 6 minutes, and a vendor was on site before noon. This time, the vendor authorization tied to my account had already been revoked. Jake tried to step in. I know, because he called the wrong plumber, refused the emergency rate, and then asked the tenant if it could wait until Monday. It was Thursday. By that evening, the tenant had copied a local housing attorney on the thread. At 8:14 p.m., Jake left his first real voicemail. "Lily, this is getting ridiculous. If you're trying to prove a point made. Call me back. Not I am sorry. Now what do you need? Just that old familiar assumption that my boundaries existed only as temporary inconveniences." Day 5, the primary residence mortgage failed to draft. That auto-pay had been coming from my account for so long, I doubt he even knew what bank processed it. At 9:03 a.m., I received the missed payment notice because my email was still attached as historical contact. At 9:11, Jake called 3 times in a row. By 9:26, he sent a text. "Why would you cancel Mom's house payment without telling me?" I stared at that sentence longer than I should have. There is a special kind of entitlement in accusing someone of not continuing to secretly finance the life you stole from them. Day 7 brought numbers. 28 missed calls, 11 voicemails, 4 texts that all used the word family as if it were a legal defense. "Lily, family does not do this. You are humiliating us. Mom would be disgusted. You know I need time to sort this out." Need is an interesting word when spoken by people who never notice what they have been given. That afternoon, Daniel's office sent notice to every property-related vendor and management contact that authority over estate decisions was disputed, and no transfers or approvals were to be accepted without written confirmation from counsel. Clean, formal, quietly devastating. Jake lost the ability to perform ownership in public because every doorway he tried led back to documentation. Day 8, Aunt Karen called, not to ask what happened, to inform me that Jake was under terrible stress and that this whole legal posture felt unnecessary between siblings. I let her finish. Then I asked if she had seen the forged signature herself. Silence. The good kind. The kind that tells you a person has suddenly realized they stepped into a room without reading the file. She changed the subject and never called again. Day 10 was the first liquidation move. Jake listed the Mustang. Cheap listed the Mustang. Cheap. Too cheap. Quick sale pricing. The kind of listing people write when they need cash before the weekend. I only knew because he forgot I still had alerts set for financial activity connected to one of the shared planning folders he had once asked me to monitor. By then, 2 tenants had formally requested written confirmation of who actually represented the estate. One had withheld rent pending clarification. Another had copied a broker after hearing rumors the properties might be sold. Chaos spreads faster than truth in real estate. Faster still when the man pretending to be in charge cannot answer basic questions about title, reserves, or lease obligations. Day 12. The panic became audible. His voicemail came in at 11:47 p.m. Voice rough, trying hard to stay even. "Lily, listen to me. We can work something out. I know you're upset, but dragging this into court is insane. These properties need management. The tenants are acting crazy. The bank is sending notices. Just call me. Just call me. You know that tone. It is the one people use when they are still bargaining with the version of you who used to rescue them." I did not call. Day 14. Cousins stopped liking his posts. That detail sounds small unless you have lived inside a family that runs on image. Silence from relatives is its own weather report. The room was shifting. People had begun hearing fragments. Fraud review, disputed will, counsel involved, notary issue. Nobody confronted him directly yet, but the audience he depended on was thinning, and men like Jake cannot survive long without an audience. Day 17, he tried a different tactic. Softness. He sent a message that only said, "I know Mom trusted you. I do too." I almost laughed when I read it, not because it was funny, but because it was so professionally manipulative. He had finally realized anger would not move me, so he reached for borrowed humility. Too late. Trust is not something you invoke after the forgery. Day 21 was the first time I pictured his apartment without ever seeing it. He had moved out of the performance by then. Friends stop offering couches when the story gets complicated. He was staying in a short-term place in Tacoma, according to a forwarding record. Daniel's investigator picked up, and I could already imagine it. Thin blinds, cheap carpet, microwave on the counter instead of built-in. That stale, warm air apartments get when nothing in them was chosen with long-term plans in mind. Meanwhile, his last public post had vanished. Day 24. The criminal referral moved forward. Day 26. The forensic examiner confirmed what I already knew. Day 28. Jake left the voicemail that told me the collapse was complete. He was crying, but even then there was calculation in it. "Lily, please. I said stupid things. I was grieving. I made mistakes. But you're my sister. Family has to mean more than paperwork." I played it once, then archived it with the rest, because that was the truth of the month after the funeral. Jake did not fall all at once. He lost access in pieces. A password here, a payment there, a tenant complaint, a missed draft, a relative going quiet, a lawyer's letter, a document examiner, a bank notice, a shrinking audience. Entitlement rarely collapses in one dramatic explosion. Usually it leaks out day by day, until the person standing in the middle of it realizes too late that what they called power was actually someone else's labor, documented, timed, and finally withdrawn, and all I did was stop holding the system together. The confrontation happened on a Saturday afternoon at Aunt Karen's house in Bellevue 6 weeks after the funeral. She called it a family meeting, which in our family usually meant someone had done something indefensible and wanted the room to rename it as misunderstanding. Her backyard looked painfully normal. White patio umbrella, lemon bars on a glass tray, folding chairs in a loose circle, the kind of setting people use when they want felony forgery to sound like a miscommunication. I almost did not go. Not because I was afraid of Jake. That part was over. But because I knew the emotional architecture of rooms like that. Coffee, cut grass, soft voices, the old family pressure to keep everything private so nobody has to say out loud what actually happened. You know that pressure. If the wound stays inside the house, maybe everyone can pretend it is not bleeding. Jake was already there when I walked through the side gate. He had lost weight in the face first. His shirt hung a little wrong at the shoulders, and there were shadows under his eyes he had not managed to shave off with sleep. But entitlement wears well on men like him. He still sat like the room owed him recovery. Aunt Karen stood when she saw me. "Lily, thank you for coming. We just want peace." Peace. In family language, that usually means a person with evidence is expected to lower it. I sat down, placed my laptop bag beside my chair, and folded my hands in my lap. Jake's eyes went straight to the bag. "Good," Uncle Mike started. "This has gone too far. Lawyers, fraud claims, criminal referrals. Your mother would be heartbroken seeing her children fight like this over property." Over property. That is how people describe theft when they are afraid to name the thief. Jake leaned forward, voice low and controlled, the way he used to sound when he wanted to seem reasonable before asking for money. "I made mistakes, fine. But cutting off accounts, freezing access, sending notices to banks and tenants, that isn't justice, it's cruelty." The room leaned toward him automatically. It always had. Jake, emotional but redeemable. Me, calm enough to be blamed for the temperature. I looked at him and asked, "Do you still claim Mom signed that will willingly?" He hesitated, just once. Then he said, "Yes." I opened my laptop. The whole patio seemed to tighten. People who dismiss paperwork always go silent when it starts answering back. I turned the screen first toward Aunt Karen, then Uncle Mike, then Jake. "This is Mom's executed will from 2024, I said. "Signed, witnessed, notarized, archived, equal split." This is the version Jake displayed at the funeral. Page 7, signature is forged. Initial placement is inconsistent. Timestamp conflicts with hospice visitation records. And this notary acknowledgement was executed in a county Mom had not entered in 11 months. No one interrupted, so I kept going. This is the forensic report. This is the hospice attendance log. This is the IP access history from Mom's laptop. These are the co-signed loan documents on the duplexes Jake called his legacy. These are the mortgage payments I covered. These are the texts where he referred to the properties as basically mine anyway before Mom died. Jake stood so fast his chair scraped the patio stone. "This is insane," he snapped. "You kept records on family?" I looked up at him and said, "You used the word family like it erased accounting. It doesn't. Generosity doesn't keep records. Accounting does." That landed. Even Aunt Karen looked down. Jake pointed at me, face flushed now. "You've always been cold. Mom knew you were never the real heart of this family." I closed the laptop halfway and gave him back his own line. "At the funeral, you said Mom wanted someone who understands people, not spreadsheets. What she actually needed was one person in this family who understood signatures." Uncle Mike turned to Jake. "Tell me that isn't true." Jake swung at the room instead. "She wanted control. She has always wanted control." That one was familiar enough to almost sting. Some lies stay alive because the family has repeated them for years. But familiar is not the same as true. So I stood up, not dramatically, just enough to break the shape of the circle. "I was not chasing control," I said. "I was paying bills, managing properties, handling hospice paperwork, and keeping this estate upright while you practice ownership in mirrors." Silence. Then Jake gave me the final line himself. "Fine," he said. "You're dead to me." I nodded once. "That is the first accurate thing you have said in 6 weeks. Nobody moved. Nobody defended him. Nobody defended him. Nobody defended me either." And honestly, that was the most honest the family had ever been. I put the laptop back into my bag and looked around the circle one last time. "You wanted peace," I said. "Peace was available before forgery. Now you get consequence." Then I walked out through the side gate into the thin Bellevue sunlight pulse, steady hands warm for the first time since the funeral, and left him sitting in the exact silence they had spent my whole life teaching me to survive. Jake was indicted 3 months later. Not immediately. That would have been too cinematic. Real consequences move like paperwork. Quietly, then all at once. First came the probate ruling. The court invalidated the forged will, reinstated Mom's original estate plan, and documented the fraud in language so dry it almost sounded merciful. Then came the financial fallout. Jake lost every claim he had tried to assert over the portfolio. The rentals were transferred according to the lawful documents. The temporary freezing orders became permanent restrictions. By the time the criminal case advanced, he was no longer a man defending an inheritance. He was a defendant explaining a forged signature. I did not attend every hearing. That surprises people when they hear the story. They imagine revenge as front row satisfaction, like I needed to watch every inch of his collapse to feel whole. I didn't. By then, I had already done the part that mattered. I had told the truth in a language the system could recognize. After that, my presence was optional. Jake filed for bankruptcy before the year ended. I heard he was living in a studio apartment in Tacoma, with thin walls, one window facing a parking lot, and a folding table where a dining room should have been. Aunt Karen called once and said he was struggling, as the struggle had appeared out of nowhere and not crawled directly out of his own choices. Uncle Mike never called again. The final phone call came on a rainy Tuesday in November, while I was still at the office reviewing a trust package for a pediatric surgeon. Jake's name lit up my screen. I let it ring twice, then answered. His voice was smaller than I had ever heard it. "Lily, please. I know I don't deserve much, but I need help. For Mom, if nothing else. For Mom." That was always the key they tried last, as if grief should reopen doors that fraud had closed. I looked out at the gray water past the Seattle skyline and said the truest thing I had learned all year. Consequences are not cruelty, Jake. They are just the bill coming due. Then I ended the call. My life now was so quiet it almost felt suspicious at first. No emergency transfers. No midnight repair calls. No family group texts using love as camouflage for extraction. I kept the properties, stabilized the estate, and hired a professional manager for the units because peace is not proving you can carry everything alone. It is deciding what no longer gets carried by you. If there is a lesson in this, it is not that you should become hard. It is that you should become clear. If someone only calls you family when they need your labor, your money, your silence, or your forgiveness, start writing things down. Start separating love from access. Start treating your boundaries like legal documents instead of emotional suggestions. Real love does not panic when accountability enters the room. If your family did this to you, would you forgive them or would you walk away? Let me know in the comments.